So this week's parsha begins like this: Vayechi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim. Yaakov lived in the land of Mitzrayim. 17 shana, 17 years. Then it says, Vayehi Yemei Yaakov Shnei Chayev. The days of Yaakov were Sheva shanim, 7 years, plural, Arbaim shana, Arbaim 40, Uma'ash shana, 100 year. So one question that's obvious is, why does the Torah describe it as two separate things? In other words, the Torah starts, Vayechi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim 17 shana. Yaakov lived in Mitzrayim 17 years. That's one point. And then it says that the total life of Yaakov was 147 years. Why doesn't it just say that Yaakov lived 147 years? And Vayikarvu Yimei Yisrael Lamos, and the days of Israel came closer to dying. And then he calls his sons, etc., and the continuation of the events. Why does it say 17 years he lived in Mitzrayim, and his total life was 147 years? So the truth is that the way to understand this, and this is what the Zohar writes, and it's also according to Pshat, according to the little interpretation, that the Torah is actually very clearly dividing the years of Yaakov into two. There is, in total, 147 years that Yaakov lives, and divided between those 147 years, there is 130 years that he lives before he comes down to Mitzrayim, and there is the 17 years that he lives in Mitzrayim. The 130 years that he lives before he comes down to Mitzrayim is the way Yaakov himself says, is there ma'at v'roim. He calls these years harsh years. These were Misha Amr Lo'elam Dai Yom Litzarasi Dai. Yaakov says that Kel Shakai, he says that I had a hard life and I had a lot of sorrows, a lot of difficulties. And when he comes to Parah, he says that my days were small and hard, and it was hard years, Roim. So the 130 years correspond to hardships of Yaakov's life, and the 130 years represent also a parallel to the 130 years that Adam and Chava separated from each other after the eating from the tree of knowledge. It says that for 130 years they separated from each other. So it represents the world of period of separation. Yaakov in a state of katnus, of smallness. Yaakov, for those 130 years, was also in a state of period of separation, harsh years. And 130 has the numeric value as the word ayin, I, which means that just as, or it's a tikkun 4, the 130 years that was caused because Vatera Isha, Vatar, Tavilun Le'inayim, it says that they saw the tree of knowledge and they saw that it was lustful for their eyes, and the damage was done through the eyes. So there's a type of tikkun, the result says, a tikkun, a type of rectification in Yaakov's life, the idea through his eyes, through Kedusha, through looking through holiness. But there's also the idea that the word ayin also spells the word ani, which is poor, which means that the years of Yaakov, the 130 years, were poor, were constricted. Ein ani ela b'das. A person that's poor is someone that's experiences a type of constriction in his mind, in his consciousness, in a way of understanding life and appreciating life. So there's a smallness in his way of thinking. That's where Yaakov represents the first 130 years of his life. And then the 17 years of his life is where he lives in Mitzrayim. And 17 in numeric value is the word tov, good. So these are the two parallels, that the first 130 years are Ra, which represents from the tree of knowledge the aspect of the tov Ra, the Ra of the tree of knowledge, the negativity of the tree of knowledge, or the world of pure, the separation of the tree of knowledge. And the 17 years in Mitzrayim represent the tov of the tree of life, of the tree of knowledge, the tov, the 17 years which he is in Mitzrayim. Now, if we see this as a movement in terms of Yaakov's life, it seems that the movement moves from a place of period of separation, hardships, and actual separations, whether it's a separation between him and his brother, and Yaakov and his brother do not get along, whether there's a separation from his father's home, whether there's friction that he has with Lavan, whether there's friction that he has maybe with Leah, or maybe even a little bit with Rachel. There's constantly friction, and then eventually the whole family falls apart with the sale of Yosef, and the brothers are upset at Yehuda, and the whole structure of everything that was yachid, that was singularity, becomes pure, becomes separation. And then finally, at the end of his life, there is a achdus, there's a type of unity a reintegration, a harmony between everything, all the pieces of the puzzle that were all falling apart. So the movement is from Ra and Pirud, from negativity and separation, into a place of Kiddusha, of holiness and sanctity, and integration and oneness. So it's from separation, Alma de Piruda, the world of separation, into Alma de Yehuda, to the world of unity. And this is the symbolic quality of Yaakov, that Yaakov symbolizes the sphere of Tiferes. Avram is Chesed. Chesed is kindness, giving. Yitzchak is Ketzchai. Yitzchak represents Gevura, restriction, Pachad Yitzchak, the fear of Yitzchak, awe, the idea of holding back. And Yaakov represents a blend, a harmony between these two elements, between giving and receiving, between sharing and holding back. Yaakov is the harmony, and the harmony of something means that it's an integration of many different elements. It's not one-dimensional. Chesed is a one-dimensional aspect. Gvur is a one-dimensional aspect. It's giving or receiving. And harmony or compassion, which is the attribute of Tiferes, is a blending of these two. So this is the character of Yaakov. This is the archetype of Yaakov. And eventually Yaakov reaches that level of integration in the end of his life. And we'll see soon exactly how this plays out. But this is the movement from Ra to Toiv, from negativity to good, and from a place of Pirud to the place of Yichud. And this structure, or this movement from Pirud to Yichud, is what Kedusha is all about. Kedusha, holiness, sanctity, wholeness, is when we move from a place of separation, from the world that appears to be in a dualistic form, or up and down, and me and you, and past and present, into a world of more Yichud. Kedusha, the movement, is from Pirud, separation, into Yichud. It begins as a singularity, as a Yachid, as a singularity. That's the root of all creation, the oneness of Hashem, the oneness of Hashem. Then it becomes Bereshis, which is two, which is the world of duality, of separation. And the purpose is to go from a place of separation to a place of Echad, which is integration of the many into the one. There's a difference between the singularity, which is Yachid, a singularity before the separation, before there's differences, before there's multiple, and then there is the idea of Echad, which is the integration of the multiple into one seamless, beautiful tapestry. That's the idea of Tiferes. That's the movement of Kedusha. And incidentally, like Dari explains in Shar Psukim, in Shoftim, Dari brings down for the Zohar that the idea of Klippa is the opposite. The idea of Klippa is that it moves from apparent type of unity into a place of separation where everything eventually falls apart. Okay, so this is what the character, and this is what Yaakov embodies, the quality of Tiferes. Now, Yaakov had a father, Yitzchak, and then he had a grandfather, Avram. Avram is the midah, is the attribute of Chesed. Yitzchak is the attribute of Gevura. But Avram Yatzu Menu Yishmael, from Avram, from Chesed, an unbalanced Chesed, a unchecked Chesed, from love, which is a kindness and a giving, leads to a type of lust. And Yishmael, which is one of the sons of Avram, is Yatza. It left the boundaries of Kiddusha, left the boundaries of sanctity, of holiness, and it became, instead of being love and giving, it became lust. That represents Yishmael. And the seed moves from Avram, the Birchas Avram, the blessing of Avram goes from Avram, and then it goes into Yitzchak. Yitzchak is the element of Gvura, which is power and strength. But Yitzchak Yatzu Menu Esav. Yitzchak has his child. That's Esav. That doesn't become part of Klal Yisrael. Doesn't become part of of people of Israel. And Esav is the element is the negative, unchecked energy of Gevura. Gevura is power, and power that's not done with subtlety and mindfulness leads to force, just being brute and very immediate and existential. And Esav represents that quality. So Yaakov sees that Avram has Yishmael, which doesn't become part of Klal Yisrael. Yitzchak has Esav, that doesn't become part of Klal Yisrael, even though he's a Mumel Yisrael, but it doesn't become part of the people of Israel. He has a separate journey. Yaakov, at the end of his life, wonders whether this is also the case with his children. He has 12 children. And his 12 children, the 12 tribes, 12 boys, the 12 tribes, represent the 12 Gvulei Alachsen, the 12 we'll call them the poles in a square, which means if you take a square, you'll have 4 on the bottom, 4 on the sides, 4 horizontal, 4 vertical, and then 4 top, another 4 horizontal. Those represent the 12 points of a square, which means the Shvatim represent the world of Pirud, separation. Yaakov is the idea of integration, Tiferes. So Yaakov is wondering whether the integration that he has, and which will flow into his children, which will become the descendants of Klal Yisrael, the parents of Klal Yisrael, the people of Israel, whether all his children will become part of Klal Yisrael, or maybe there's a type of negative integration where some things have to be rejected. Not everything in this world has to be integrated. Some things, they're best to do with them, and the way to truly integrate them is actually by rejecting them. So Yaakov is uncertain whether all his children, just like Avram had Yishmael and Yitzchak had Esav, will this also be the case with himself? And this is what will help us understand 2 interesting episodes in this parsha. The first one is where Yosef is told that Yaakov is sick, and so he brings his children to him. Now this is 17 years later. They're living already in Egypt for a long time. And then it says, Vayar Yisrael is b'nei Yosef. Yisrael sees the children of Yosef. Vayomer mi ela, and he says, who are these? This is in verse 8, Imam Ches, 48:8. Vayar Yisrael is b'nei Yosef. Yisrael sees the children of Yosef. Vayomer mi ela, who are these? Vayomer Yosef aviv, and Yosef responds to his father, Baneihem, they are my children, Asher nasam li Elokim hazeh, which Hashem Elokim has given me. Vayomer Chad Malei, Yaakov says, bring them to me and I will bless them. This is a very puzzling episode. This is 17 years after Yaakov is living already in Egypt, and many times he's obviously seen his grandchildren, and he knows exactly how they look, he knows who they are, and all of a sudden, when he's about to give them a blessing, he says, Mi Ela, who are these? Who are these? So there's different ways of interpreting different types of interpretations of this. Maybe it's because Chavivos, he's trying to bring awakening of love to express that these is his grandchildren, like the Netziv writes, or he's sort of blind, but he can make out a silhouette of their image, but he doesn't see their faces because he's old. But the word Mi'ela, the question of Mi'ela, who are these, really seems to be a very stark statement, like who are these people? Now there is also another way of interpreting this that some commentaries will like to suggest, that it has to do, that this whole episode of Mi'ela, and he says, Banayim, these are my children, is really Emuktam Uchabar Torah. There's no linear sequence in the Torah. So this actually episode, according to Rabbi Shmuel Chafni Gaon, based on what Rabbi Shmuel Chafni Gaon, one of the Gaonim write, that it's possible this whole event actually occurred in the beginning when Yaakov and Yosef first encountered each other, right when they came to Egypt, and this actually happened 17 years prior. But according to the simple reading, which most commentaries learn, all commentaries learn basically, is that this happened 17 years later. So the question is, what is Yaakov's question, Mi'ela? And his answer, Yosef's answer is, Bonahem, Asher Nasan Elokim hazeh, these are my children, which Elokim has given me. What's the question? Mi'ela and Bonahem. So Rashi says, Mi'ela, Rashi says, that he sees the children of Yosef. What does it mean he sees them? He wants to bless them, but the Shekhinah departs him, because there'll be Rava and Achav and Yehu that will come from the children of Yosef. He sees that in the future there will be not such positive people that will be descendants of these 2 children of Ephraim and Manasseh. So he asks, Mi'ela, where does these children come from? Should I bless them? Because what's going to be in the future with these children? And his real question is, are they really going to be part also of Klal Yisrael? Maybe these are negative integrations that should not be harmonized and integrated, but in fact rejected, and that in itself is the best possible route. So he says, Mi'ela. What does Yosef respond? Which Hashem has given me. So Rashi brings on from Masechtas Kala that he shows them a marriage contract. He says, no, I got married correctly. Which is not really the question. Yaakov is not asking a question where you came from and if this marriage is correct. Yaakov is asking a question is, what's going to be in the future? And Yosef responds something about the past. How is that an answer to Yaakov's question? Besides the fact that where does Yosef have the ksuva with him? Why does he have a ksuva with him? But that's a simple question, maybe a pshat question. But the real question is, what's this dialogue? Yaakov says, Mi Ela, and he responds. Now the name Elokim, one of the names of Hashem, which is called Elokim, is a plural. Elokim is Elokah is singular, and Elokim is plural. Elokim represents, like the parshas writes, Elokim is the numeric value of the word Hateva, nature. What is Elokim? Elokim is actually comprised of two words. There's Ilam Yudke, it could be the silence of Hashem, but it also is a combination of the words Mi and Ela. Elokim is Mi Ela. Mi Ela means who are these? Who is this? Mi Ela. Who is all these things? That's the question. And Elokim is the yichud, the unification between Mi and Ela. The Elokim represents an understanding that all the Ela, all the things of the universe, is connected to the who, to the Creator. So Mi Ela, this is what Yaakov is asking. Yaakov is saying, I see that there's some type of pira, there's some type of separation, there's some type of not positive outcome from this integration with the children of Yosef, because I see that in the future something is going to be negative. So he asked the question is, Mi Ela, who are these? Are these going to be part of Klal Yisrael? Is this a positive integration which he should include? Or maybe it's the same narrative that Avram had with Ishmael and Yitzchak had with Esav. Maybe these are not supposed to be integrated because this is not Elokim. He's not seeing the divinity, the godliness within this. He's not seeing the unity, the world of Achdus. He's saying maybe they're Ela, maybe they're many, and they're plural, and they're separated from the me. So what does Yosef answer him? Yosef says, these is what Elokim has given me. Yosef is saying that these children come from a holy place, were married in a holy marriage, and they also recognize the idea, and they live the idea of Elokim. They recognize it as Elokim Bazeh. They recognize that Elokim has given me. They recognize the blessing, their own blessing in their own life, that it comes from Elokim. So Yosef is saying, Father, you're worried that maybe this type of integration is negative and it shouldn't be, and it should be rejected. And he says, Mi Ela. So the response that Yosef says is Elokim Hashanasam Bazeh. He says Elokim. That's the first episode, and the same thing repeats itself again a little bit further on. In chapter 49, Perek Mem Tes, the pasuk starts off. Vayechi Yaakov al banav vayomer. Yaakov calls his children and he tells them, "He asu v'gid lechem asher yikol lechem asher ma'achas hayam." Gather together, and I will tell you what will occur to you at the end of times. Then he says, "He kapsu v'shimu b'nei Yaakov." Come together, the children of Yaakov. So he says first, he asfu. First says the word he asfu, which means to gather, to come closer. And then he says the word ikapsu. What's the difference between asfu and ikapsu? They seem to be the same word, which means to gather, to come together. And why is it repeated twice? So the Targum Yonason says, come together, which means, according to the Targum, means purify yourself, elevate yourself. And like Rashi writes, Rashi says, brings on the Gemara in Pesachim Nunvav, that says, Bikesh Yaakov legalas haketz. Yaakov wanted to reveal the ketz, the end of times, and again the Shekhinah departs from him. So then that's the first one. He also is when he wants to tell them the ketz. He wants to tell them the end of time. He wants to reveal to them Mashiach. He wants to reveal to them the end of time, what will happen, the Mashiach reality of the world, the redemptive reality of the world, the Alma the Yechud, the world of unity. He sees that the Shekhinah departs him, so then he says, so okay, let me just gather together on a smaller level, on a physical level, and I'll bless you. So originally what Yaakov is trying to give them is an understanding of Achris Hayam, the end of times. And he tells them, he also purify yourself, elevate yourself, unify yourself, enter into the world of Yichud. What happens? The Shekhinah leaves him. So Yaakov again says, I want to integrate all my children into a level of Achdus, into the level of unity, and that's the idea of Tiferes. The idea of the blending, of the harmony, of the compassion of the sphere, is the blending of all the different elements of the 12 tribes which represent the 12 sides. I want to bring them together, create one Klal Yisrael, one nation. Maybe because I want to reveal it to them, and the Shekhinah lives in me, maybe there is someone here in this group, just like Yitzchak had Esav and Avram had Yishmael. Maybe there's someone in this group of the children that are not meant to be integrated. And he tells them that, according to some Midrashim, it tells them that the word kuf and tzadik, which is ketz, the end of time, doesn't appear in your names. There's no letter kuf and tzadik in the names of the Shvatim, the name of the tribes. And they respond to him that there's also no letters of ches and tes, which is chet. There's no letter for sin in our names as well. But let's go back to the Gemara. The Gemara says like this, that the children of Yaakov tell him, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. They tell him, Shema Yisrael, listen Israel, listen our father Israel, listen Yaakov. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem is our God. Hashem is Echad, Hashem is one. The same thing that Yosef responded and says, Elokim Hashem Nasim B'zeh. The same idea that Yosef says that this is Elokim, I recognize Elokim. The children of Yaakov say, Shema Yisrael, listen Israel, there's nothing to worry about. We also understand that Hashem is Echad, that Hashem is one. Hashem is Elokeinu and Hashem is Echad. And Echad, which means one, unity, deeper. What is Yaakov trying to do? Besides the fact that Yaakov is trying to integrate them, and Yaakov is trying to get the midah of Tiferes, the attribute of Tiferes, which includes all of them, he wants to reveal to them Achar Sayam, he wants to reveal the end of time. Now we can see this in two ways. We can see this that he's trying to give them like a prophetic image of the possibility of what will happen in the future. But on a deeper level, what this means, he wanted to reveal to them the end of time. He wanted them to experience the end of time in the present. He wanted them to experience Mashiach. He wanted them to experience Olam Haba, or Me'ein Olam Haba, a glimmer of the world to come in the present moment. When upon Yaakov it says, Yaakov Avinu lo mes, Yaakov did not pass away. What does it mean that Yaakov Avinu lo mes, that Yaakov didn't pass away? The Gemara says in Tainus. The Yaakov Avinu lo mes, the Gemara says, the was done all for no reason. So it says, just like his children are alive, he's alive. But the depth of what it means that Yaakov was alive, what is death? Death means when the elements return back into their properties. When every single part of the body returns back to its source. The body itself is a combination of different elements, and when the body has no longer some centering, which allows for all the parts of the body to function as a unified whole system, the body literally breaks apart and enters into the world of Pirud, and every single element goes back to its element. That's what the idea of death is. Death is Pirud. Not only is death a separation from life, like when they ate from the tree of knowledge, which is duality, separation, they experienced death, which is separation from life, but the entire concept and construct of death, even death the way you experience in any type of thing in this world, whether it's the death of an animal or death of a flower or tree, that means that the thing actually falls apart. It falls into the world of Pirud. It's no longer misached, it's no longer unified, it's entering into the world of Pirud. And this is what Yaakov, because Yaakov galas leketz. When Yaakov wanted to reveal the ketz, the end of times, Yaakov says, He asu v'gidul lechem. He also means gather together, unify yourself, purify yourself, like the Targum says, v'gidul lechem, and I'll draw you to that time. Haggadah means to be drawn. The Moshe Chesalev draws a person into that place. I want to draw you into that transcendent place of achdus, of unity, the way I experienced unity, the way I'm experiencing unity at the end of my life. When I finally understood and brought all the pieces of my life together, and I finally can say that my life is toiv, it's good, it's not ra. Ra comes from the word ru'ua, something that's broken, something that's broken apart. Toiv means that it's whole, it's complete. In the first 130 years, he's living in the world of Pirud more. And when he finally enters Mitzrayim, paradoxically, when he finally enters into Mitzrayim, he's finally able to reach a point where it's the 17 years of Toiv, where things are no longer broken and Ra, and ani, and poor, and disconnected, but he's able to find a harmony within everything and finally able to bring everything together. Even his grandchildren are able to be integrated as part of Klal Yisrael. He comes to his children and says, now I want you to experience what I'm experiencing. I want to reveal to you the ketz. I want you to experience the end of time in the present. I want you to have a glimmer of the world to come, of the world of Achdus in the world of Pirud. And of course, we know the story. There's a Stalkum and a Shechina. The Shechina leaves him, and they say Shema Yisrael Hashem Echad Echad, which means we believe in the Achdus, but it's with our eyes closed. It's not something that we're experiencing this Achdus. And Yaakov says, Baruch Hashem K'lei Mechus L'Olam V'Od. Hashem should be blessed in this world, in place of time and space. There's still an avoid, there's still work for you to be done, and eventually at the end of time will come when we'll finally recognize, and the whole world will recognize, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad.